Hello everyone and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Automating Information Security. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Mark Baggett, SANS instructor and course author. If during the webcast you have any questions for Mark, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. We will be answering them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Mark.
Thank you, Carol. Good evening or afternoon, everyone. This is Mark Baggett, and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about how we can make our lives simpler by automating information security, and I'm going to be talking to you about how to do that using Python. So today is just a great time to be in the security industry. There is such a high demand for us and our skills. Right? Some recent statistics have talked about the number of people who are in this industry and the employment rates. I've seen some numbers that say that there's 112% employment for people in this industry that have useful skills, meaning that people who can perform the skills that are necessary or perform the tasks required of information security professionals today usually have more than one employer. And there's just no end in sight for the demand for finding good qualified information security professionals. There's going to be a deficit in people who can fill these positions for some time to come. The graph you see is for Indeed.com, which is a website that posts various job listings in the information security industry. And the blue line is the number of postings that they put out there for information security, and then the orange lines are the number of clicks on those job listings. So there's a lot more people looking for people with our skills than there are people who are trying to find jobs. This is great news for us from a job security standpoint, but it's really bad news if we are focused on being successful in our mission. We're not going to find a lot of people to come in and help us and do these jobs along with us. So in order to really be effective in our mission, we have to work smarter, not harder, to go with the old cliche. We have to automate the things that we're doing. I automate my daily tasks just about all the time. I'll write little programs that will do incident response collection of tools. So reach out to remote machines, collect web entries, collect the names of programs that are running on the machines, pull those back to my centralized systems. I'll write little programs to automate for the collection of or analysis of forensics artifacts. Sometimes I'll do this because the existing tools that are out there are either really, really expensive and not available to me, and sometimes there's just not tools available to analyze different forensics artifacts. The operating system is changing all the time, and Windows and various applications are always adding new methodologies to their applications to collect data about us. And as forensics analysts...
Excuse me, Mark, I apologize to interrupt your presentation, but could you please switch to telephone? There's some audio issues occurring.
I sure can.
Thanks.
Just 1 second.
Take your time. Well, in the meantime, I want to let the audience know that a copy of the recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. Also, you can find your CEUs for all completed webcasts by logging into your SANS portal account, navigate to your account dashboard, then click My Webcasts. You can then download your CEU on the right-hand side of the web page. And lastly, if you'd like to learn Python from SANS, check the chat window. I've put a link in there and I'll re-post that. So Mark, you'll also need to switch to the telephone tab under the audio.
Okay. How's that?
All right, great. You're on. Thank you, Mark.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Carol, for resolving that issue. So as I was saying, I'll write these little programs all the time to automate tools or to automate tasks that I have to perform to make my life easier. I've written tools to do incident response, forensics artifacts. Sometimes these forensics artifacts, there's so many new forensic artifacts that are being introduced to the operating system that the public tools that are out there just can't keep up with analyzing those artifacts and giving us the data that we need in order to really understand what happened in an incident or for law enforcement. I'll write little programs to do some automation of just daily administration of my various Linux and Windows systems, from grabbing logs off of those systems, parsing the logs, generating reports on the number of updates that have been installed or the number of updates that are available for install, for managing my IDS rules, and also write little tools to experiment with new defensive techniques or new offensive techniques, things to try and push the industry forward to introduce new techniques for protecting our systems. So I'll show you a couple examples. Some of these tools that I have published publicly that you can go out and download. Others haven't. I'll just show you real quickly some examples of a couple of these. So pretty recently I released a tool called freak.py and freak server. What these do is they can integrate in with your SIMs that collect information about on processes and traffic that's running on your system, and they're focused on identifying command and control malware that uses any type of random looking host name, so the dynamically generated algorithm host names. And this is a tool that's been pretty successful and been pretty widely used to identify hosts that are using that type of traffic. You can get more information on freak.py or freak server. Just this is released through the Internet Storm Center, so there's some postings out there. If you Google Mark Baggett and freak server, you'll find some downloads to links and a story by myself and Justin Henderson to talk about how you can integrate those things into your servers. There's also domain stats, which is useful for finding phishing domains. So when phishing domains are stood up, they typically have a rather recent born-on date, if you will, for their domains. So Google, Microsoft.com, all of these domain name registrations have been out there for a very long time. So by automating the retrieval of the whois information and seeing how long a domain has been on the network, we can attempt to identify some of these phishing domains. And then there's Liam Neeson. This is a cool little tool. I would put this into the last category of experimenting with new defensive techniques. This is a tool that I wrote as a joke, but as it turns out, it can actually be rather useful in defending your network. So this has to do with the way attackers steal our passwords. I did a posting on the Internet Storm Center sometime last year on ways that we could detect when people run Mimikatz on the network by creating some fake user credentials on our workstations and then identifying when those things are used. And somebody challenged me and said, hey, can you do the same thing on Linux, where we protect our Linux-based hashes? Well, I can't create honey tokens, as we called them on a Linux-based systems, but I can do a pretty cool little trick to protect our Linux shadows file. So when an attacker breaks into our Linux system, they will come in and grab a copy of our passwords by typing cat etc shadow. And there on my screen, you can see down here at the bottom, we've got all the hashes associated with all of my example users that are in my file. Well, I want to make sure that the attackers can't grab those files. So I wrote a little tool called Liam Neeson. So I'll run Liam Neeson to protect my shadow file. Python Liam Neeson. I'll do it -H so we can see all the options that are available. So I can do a -P, and it will protect my shadow file. I can do a -U, and it'll unprotect my shadow file. And if my shadow file is too precious to me and I'm afraid of it touching my shadow file, I can give it an alternate path just to see what it does. But I have no fear. I will just -P, let Liam Neeson protect my shadow file. If I try and protect it again with Liam Neeson, it'll tell me that, hey, one Liam Neeson is more than enough protection for anybody. You are good to go. So what has Liam done to my shadow file? Now when I cat my Etsy shadow. I no longer see the hashes associated with the users. Instead, I see his little soliloquy. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you're looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money, blah, 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 and the little speech that he gives from the Taken series. So what did I do? I just messed up my my shadow file, right? Well, no, I didn't. Actually, the shadow file is there. It's completely intact. You can add users to the system. It's just they're not displayed with cat. It's taking advantage of the way that the cat file, the cat program works. If we were to look at this inside of an editor, you see that the shadow file is still there, but we've added at the bottom of our shadow file these control characters that move my mouse, moves the cursor back up to the top of the screen, and then it just prints over the existing shadow files, or the existing thing. So when it's displayed, first the entire shadow file is displayed, and then the information to hide the shadow file is printed over the top of it. Well, all this is really going to do is anger the attackers. If they were to break in your system, I doubt they would turn and walk away with their tail between their legs when they see the threat from Liam Neeson on their shadow files. But instead of actually adding this text to overwrite this thing, what I could do is when I display the shadow file, I could, instead of moving up 47 lines and then over 15 before printing blank lines, I could just move up one line and then move over 20 characters and change these 3 characters in my shadow file to 3 different characters. And then when attackers cat my shadow file, what they will see is they'll see what appears to be a legitimate shadow file. They copy that down to their machine and they can try and crack those passwords. It's not likely that those passwords will ever crack, but if they do, it's not going to crack to the correct password. So the technique in this tool is there, but it's just to demonstrate the technique for how we could do things. So this is one example of a tool that I've written to do this. Another example in the forensics arena would be ShrumDump that I released recently. ShrumDump is taking advantage of an artifact collected on Windows systems by the System Resource Utilization Manager. So this thing, and it appears in your taskbar. So if you're on a Windows system and you do a Control-Alt-Delete, just do this, Control insert MWM, Test Manager. You can come in here to your app history, and in here you can see the application history that you've got, amount of CPU time, network time, metered network time, tile updates, and various information. What you're seeing here is just really the beginning of the information that's being collected by this database. So if we were to go into this database and actually dump some of the artifacts on there, we'd see that there's a lot more information on there. So I released a tool called ShrumDump that I found to be very useful in incident response investigations, figuring out what the attackers did. Because this is recording every process that runs on our system, what they use with network utilization and other things. So here's an example of output from the ShrumDump. It's got various tables that are in this database. One of them is network usage. That's on the network usage table. We can see every process that's run on our host. We can see the names of the users that ran the program. We can see which Wi-Fi networks they were connected to, or if they were on a local area network that's identified. We can see how many bytes were transmitted across those networks. And just from this one tab, I've been able to observe that attackers ran a backdoor program. We'll say it was Netcat. Ran Netcat on their system under an account that they had created and then deleted. On the system, they had deleted the account and they had deleted the executable, so they were no longer available unless you did some extensive forensics just to recover the files, recover the profiles, and things like that. But just by analyzing the Shrum database, I was able to very quickly see that they had run, in my applications, I would see that they ran netcat.exe here, and I would see that the profile that was associated, where the user's SID that was associated with running that program was there. So this is a little forensics program that I wrote and just released this very recently. So the time to develop these programs was short. As a matter of fact, over the last few nights I've been working on a tool to do some link parsing The .lnk shortcut files, there's a limited availability of good tools that are out there that are freely available to parse through those artifacts and give you some information on that. But so writing these tools, I just find the need to do little things with these tools all the time. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what language do you want to do these in? There's lots of great languages out there to do this. PowerShell is awesome. I love PowerShell. C, another great programming language. There's all kinds of programming languages, and there's all kinds of religious wars about which programming languages are best. I'm not going to tell you that Python is the best language of all of them, but it's certainly one of my favorite, and it's a favorite of many people out there. So why is Python a good language to learn? Well, it's simple to use. Right? It's a very easy programming language to learn, and it is widely popular. So here we see some statistics of number of public applications that were posted using different languages, and you can see that Python is a very popular language amongst people who are developing tools and need to rapidly develop applications. Python's been around for a while, since 1989. It was originally written by a guy named Guido van Rossum, and then he was released it publicly in 1991. And it's noted for its simplicity of use. It's one of the goals of the Python development team to make Python easy to use and fun to use. As a matter of fact, the name Python, although you'll often see a snake associated with the logos and things like that, the name Python actually comes from Monty Python's Flying Circus. It was named after Monty Python's Flying Circus because they want the language to be fun, and they'll use references to Monty Python throughout documentation and other things. Python is an interpreted language, so while you have languages like C and other languages where you will run it through a compiler and produce an executable, with Python you have to have an interpreter to read your .py programs and execute whatever they say to do. Now, we can take those .py programs and the interpreter and package them up into a .exe using some tools like py2exe and pyinstaller. And what these will do is they will create an executable that contains both the interpreter and the script and put those together into an executable so that you can easily move these things around from system to system. That makes it very easy for sharing the applications with people who don't have Python on their system, don't want to worry about installing third-party modules and whatever else you've used inside of your Python program. And I'll often, when I decide to publicly release something, create it as an executable as well so that people can easily use it without installing Python on their systems. But the majority of Linux and Macintoshes have Python pre-installed on them, so we can just use our scripts there quite often. Now, there's lots of free ways that you can learn Python. Google has an excellent Python program, and you can see the URL that's there, developers.google.com /edu-python. This is a great way to learn Python. Code Academy has an excellent Python programming program where they're going to walk you through piece by piece. Hey, write this little program, now write this program. There's a Python programming class by DataCamp. Udemy has a Intro to Python course that's out there, and there's also collegiate level academic Python classes that you can go and take the exact same courses where people are who are getting computer science degrees are learning Python. And all of this is available for you today free on the internet. So there's lots of great alternatives to learning Python for free. Now, I of course have a Python class that I hope you'll consider as well. There's lots of stumbling blocks that people often have when it comes to learning Python or learning to program in general. One of those stumbling blocks is the fact that there's a critical mass of knowledge that you have to achieve before you are really productive in developing applications. You know, knowing a little bit of code will make you a little productive, but really once you've learned, there's a point where you have to know a certain amount of code before you can really start to solve interesting problems with any programming language. And oftentimes people will begin to learn through these free online services, and they'll only get so far, and you don't get the big reward, the big the big payoff to investing the time until you've invested a certain amount of time. So you really need to set aside some time at work, say at least a week, that you're going to go through and spend the time to learn these different programming languages from any source. Sometimes the best way to do that is just get some time away from the office, to come to a conference and spend the time there to learn. And oftentimes as you're going through, you'll have questions. And if you want to progress, then just having the ability to ask someone, hey, how do I do this? I'm having trouble with this. I don't understand this concept, is often a great way to accelerate moving through learning these systems. And everyone learns differently. Sometimes you just need a personal trainer. You know, I can do jumping jacks and sit-ups and jump rope for free, but sometimes it's just helpful to go and have someone that's there who already knows how to do this stuff to motivate you to get you go through these things. And that's one of the things that the Python course is designed to do. Let me tell you a little bit about how the Python course is set up. The first 2 days are the Essentials Workshop, where we talk about that critical mass of information that you really have to have before you can be productive in Python. Now, if you already know how to code in Python, or you already know how to program in any language, this section could run a little slow for you. And you might be worried that you would lose interest. Well, I've got a solution for that that's in there. We've designed the course to really address all learning skill levels, such that, you know, whether you're a beginner or an advanced person, you're going to be able to come in and get a lot out of the program based upon your existing skill level. I'll talk about that in just a second. After days 1 and 2, where we cover the Essentials Workshop, then we go through days 3 through 5, where we talk about how to use those essential skills that we've developed to do things that we need to do as information security professionals. Days 3 through 5 are broken down where they have themes on each day. So there's a defensive theme where we talk about how to develop skills, or the skills that we need in order to build programs that are useful in all disciplines, but we're going to talk about it focusing on specific applications we can use in defense. That's not to say that if you're in forensics or in offense that the skills there don't apply to you. Some of the things we talk about in defense is how to open files, how to read files from the file system, and how to parse information out of those files. And certainly regardless of whatever discipline that you're in, those are certainly skills that you need. But for the applications that we develop on that day, we're focused on log analysis, log parsing, and things like that. Then we have a day on forensics, where we talk about ripping information up in binary formats and analyzing that data. And we have a day on offense, where we will develop offensive tools. We then have a capture the flag. The capture the flag event is on day 6, and we'll bring together all of the skills that we've used over the previous 5 days. Now on days 1 through 5, I've also got this pyWars challenge. And this pyWars challenge is the level setter. So if you come in and you're brand new, never done any programming before, which is about 20 to 30% of the people who come to the class, then you're probably going to spend a lot more time listening to the new material. But if you already know how to program, I didn't want you to come in there and be bored to death as I'm telling people what a variable is, what a for loop is, because we start from the very essentials of what you need to know, assuming that you know absolutely nothing about it. So that people who already have some of those fundamentals under their belt aren't just bored to tears for the first 2 days, we developed a self-learning model where I have pyWars challenges that run for the first 5 days that you can move quickly through the first 2 days of material and then begin to work on advanced programming skills throughout the course. And I'll help you out as we go through those things. So one of the reasons we do this is because there's a great diversity of people who come to these classes. We'll have veteran programmers who already know how to code. We have non-programmers who have never coded before. And then we also have people who coded in other languages but are brand new to Python. So that's one of the challenges that we have with the course. Another one is a challenge that's best illustrated by an old book by Frederick Brooks called The Mythical Man Month. He wrote a book where he analyzed professional coders and saw how productive they were on a given day and determined that the average programmer develops about 10 good source lines of code a day once you go through their entire process of code development, rewriting, and then going through QA and so forth. About 10 good lines of code a day. So for new developers, we're going to have to go a little bit slower on some of the code. So and the last problem we have is that the only way to really learn how to code is to do it, to write programs. You're not going to learn to code by looking at somebody who's pointing at PowerPoint slides or by watching YouTube videos on how to program. You have to actually write code in order to learn to code. So this is how we try to solve those problems. One is the need for keyboard time. There's a lot of lab time in here. Matter of fact, the people who come to the class who already know how to do some Python programming typically will spend the entire class working on the labs that are presented in the pyWars challenge. I'll have people come to class and I will give them the introduction. We'll introduce pyWars challenges and labs. And other than asking a couple of questions about, hey, what's a good way to do this? I've run into this problem. They are paying absolutely no attention to me in the course material as we go through them. And then we have other people who are brand new to coding, and they spend a lot of time listening as we go through the material and working through the labs. So there's a lot of keyboard time, long labs in the class, and then the more advanced you are, the more time you spend in the labs as you're going through these things. It's designed to be a self-learning model where we meet you where you are. Problem with the 10 source lines of code, well, I'll give you fill-in-the-blank programs that you have to go and complete just 1 or 2 lines of these programs so that advanced users can ignore my sample programs with more lines of code, and then the beginners, they can use the fill-in-the-blank programs. And the last thing we have is pyWars that we use to the level set, and I'll show you a little bit of pyWars. So pyWars is a capture the flag that runs through the first 5 days of class. It has 80 challenges. Those 80 challenges cover all of the material from day 1 through day 5, and then far beyond even day 5. So there are advanced challenges in there that cover advanced topics that we don't even have time to cover in a 5-day class. But students will come in, they'll work through those challenges. As they run into problems, they ask questions, and the instructor will be there to help them out as they work through these things. So the first couple of challenges that are in there are not really real-world specific. They're more academic, learning the fundamentals of code, and then the last 80 or so, or the last 40 or so challenges that are in there are real-world problems. Like, here is a problem that a forensics examiner might face. Here's a problem that a network defender might face. Solve this using Python, and so forth, and offensive as well. Okay. There's also a pyWars Hall of Fame. So anyone who's completed all of the pyWars challenges is able to submit a question to the pyWars Hall of Fame. So the pyWars Hall of Fame is another pyWars server that all the attendees get, which will have questions that have been developed by other attendees. Now, currently there's, I think, 3 or 4 questions in the pyWars Hall of Fame because I try to have more pyWars challenges in there than anyone can produce or can complete in a week of class. Even if you come in the morning, go home in the evenings, work through challenges offline and at night, and then bring back in solutions, I want to give you so much content in this class that the best programmers are fully engaged in learning and developing new skills as they go through this class. So, and if somebody does complete any of the challenges or all of the challenges that I present, I always add more after that class to the challenges. I would have 80 of them today. I think the first time I introduced this, I had just under 60 challenges, but so I think I've had a little more than 20 people who have completed all the challenges, and that way I can always say, when you come into class, no one has finished all of the pyWars challenges. Because there's always a new one that's in there if we have. So you'll have a copy of this pyWars challenges that if you finished all the pyWars challenges there, you would also have the ones that are completed or that have been created by the people who have finished all those challenges. And often those are some very interesting and more difficult challenges because if you finished all of the pyWars challenges, then you're a pretty advanced programmer to begin with. And you can take these pyWars servers with you offline when you leave the class. So those that come to the class, they'll get a copy of the Hall of Fame server. There's also a copy of the pyWars server with all of the labs that are available while you're in the classroom, or all of the labs that are covered in the books are also in that offline pyWars server. Now, it's not all of the pyWars servers that, all the questions that are in the pyWars server that are not in the books. I don't want to get to a point where people have solved challenges before they come to the class. Come to the class on day one, finish all 80 of the challenges because they did them before they ever came. Maybe they got a copy of the pyWars server from a coworker or something like that. So we don't give out all the pyWars challenges, but we do give you a copy of every pyWars challenge that is in the 6 days of material, so that after you leave the class, you can still continue to work through the labs when you go home. So let's do a quick demo of pyWars and just show you how we use this to teach people coding in the classroom. So I'm going to switch over to my VM that has Python class in it. Let's see here. Let's do that. All right. So the way the pyWars server is set up, it's an online server that's shared throughout the classroom. So every student who's in there is logged into the pyWars server. I've already logged in and got this thing set up before we get in here. And there's different functions that we can call. I can call d.question. And right now I've got a 0 inside of the parentheses. The way this is broken down is the letter D here is a variable. Now if you've never done any coding before, I'm probably going to use some terms here that you are unfamiliar with. That's okay. I hope that you'll be able to get a sense of how we're using the learning methodology that we're using in the class, as opposed to, I'm not going to be able to teach you Python, obviously, in a 1-hour session, but I hope you'll get a sense of how we're using the system to teach people to code. So D is a variable, contains an object that we use to interact with our pyWars server. pyWars server is on the network, and it contains all of the questions, and it also scores your answers as you submit them. Now, every question, in this case, I'm asking for question 0. Question 0 says I need to return the string that I get when I call data 0 as the answer. All of the questions have questions. They have some data that I have to manipulate in some way, and then I can submit that answer to the pyWars server. So that's question 0. Here's my data for 0. And when I ask for the data for 0, it says submit me. So I have to submit this. This challenge is to submit the string submit me to the server. The way that you submit things to the server is by calling d.answer. Okay, d.answer, and then you give it the question number you're going to submit the answer to, followed by the answer to the question. Okay, so my data is submit me, so I'll type submit me. And it comes back and it'll tell me, hey, timeout. It says you didn't do that fast enough. In order to do this, because we're here to develop programs, what I have to do is programmatically submit the answer to this challenge when I call the answer function. So rather than putting in the string submit me, you only have 2 seconds between the time you call d.data and the time you submit your answer. So what I'll do here is I will call d.answer, and then inside of that same function call, I'll call d.data 0. What this will do is when I press enter, it'll execute the part of the Python program that is inside of the parentheses first, d.data 0, and then it will retrieve that string submit me and then send that in as answer number 0. And when I do, it comes back and tells me I've got that correct. Now, if I wanted to see how I was doing, I could print d.score, and it would tell me that my IP address has 1 point, and then I've answered question 0. And of course, all of the players that are in the classroom, their scores are collected, and they can see the scores. You can see how each other are doing. There's capture the flag as you go through this first 5 days. This is the same engine we'll use for the additional capture the flags and the capture on day 6. and in the pyWars challenges that you have offline, as well as the Hall of Fame, all use the same engine. Of course, different questions bases are loaded, and some of them, the challenges here, this is a very simple challenge. Then we advance to more advanced forensics challenges. So, for example, if we want to just take a look at one of the more advanced questions, I'll ask for question 59. No, that's data 59. Okay. This question 59 says that we're going to be starting a server on our machine called the socket challenge. And then with the socket challenge, we are going to write a Python program that's going to connect to port UDP port 4444 and then transmit the data string. And then we'll be given some response back from the server that tells us what to do next. So it's a server that's running on our machine. We have to interact with it across the network. And this is all material that's covered in the course where we talk about how to interact with various backdoor programs and applications and different services you've got running on your network and communicate traffic back and forth across those, as well as the Python, the forensics information and other things. Okay. Let's just take a look at the second pyWars question, and then I'll jump back into talking a little bit more about what's in the course. So question 1 says submit the sum of data plus 5. So here's d.data 1. You can see that gives me the number 14. Now, also notice that every time I call data, data changes. So you've got 2 seconds, and the data is constantly changing. And all of these elements are there to enforce the fact that in order to solve this, I'm going to have to write a small program in order to submit that answer. So d.answer to number 1 is, let's call d.data for number 1 and add 5 to it. And it comes back and it'll tell us we're correct. And that's just a short feel for pyWars and how we use pyWars in the classroom to teach these concepts. Okay. I do have a couple of slides in here on introduction to some Python concepts about what variables are and assignments, and this is the level that we start at in the course material. We start at the very beginnings of what you need to know in order to get started in developing Python. Then, after the Essentials workshop, we turn to the more advanced skills. We'll talk about how we can do things in forensics, defense, and offense. Day 3 is our defensive operations theme today, where we talk about file operations, log analysis, using regular expressions to extract useful pieces of data, and packet analysis. So by the end of this, you'll be able to read PCAPs, parse them, pull out information, and gather statistics on them. And we're going to go far beyond just opening and reading simple packets of SCAPI. We're going to be generating reports that we can find attackers inside of the packets who are performing certain operations. On our forensics theme day, we'll talk about file carving, image-based forensics, interacting with databases, reading artifacts from databases such as SQL database and other things, as well as we'll also talk about how to interact with websites on the internet. On day 5, our offensive day, we talk about networking, how to do process execution, how to handle process exception, Python objects and understanding objects and inheritance, as well as redirecting I/O and creating some shells and backdoors. On day 5, we'll get into creating various kinds of backdoors that can be used for command and control inside of a penetration test. So that you can create a backdoor that you can place on a target, avoiding antivirus software, avoiding host intrusion prevention systems, and placing that target on a well-secured system to give you can command and control. Now, I use this in penetration tests myself, but I've also used these same programs in incident response when I need to deploy a small agent to a remote host that I can then send commands to observe new processes that are being launched and things like that on those backdoors. And we'll talk about how you can do those things in detail in the course. And then after you've completed those sections of the course, then the course is over. If you've won the capture the flag, you see the coin there on your left. Each members of the winning teams from the capture the flag receive a Python coin. Also, if the first person who would complete all of the challenges in the pyWars challenges would also receive the coin. And then we also have the GIAC Python coder certification that's associated with the course. So If you know Python, you have an opportunity to prove it, obtain that industry certification so that you can show employers out there that you know how to solve this problem that employers really have. And as we started out talking about just the need for information security professionals to be able to automate simple tasks to make them more productive in what they do day to day. And Python is a great way to rapidly develop tools so that you can automate your jobs and be more productive. And getting the GPYC certification is a great way to show employers out there who are looking for people who can work in very highly efficient ways that you have these skills and can perform this task for them. Okay. There's a couple opportunities to take the class coming up. We've got in London in March, so March 13th. This one is just around the corner. I'm really looking forward to heading out to London and teaching the class there. I'll also be teaching it in Orlando at SANS 2015 this April. And I'll also be teaching it at SANS Fire in July. Josh Fire from Security Weekly is a great instructor. He's also an instructor for the class. He's going to be teaching it in Northern Virginia this May. And then July 3rd, he'll be teaching that in Australia, which I am immensely jealous of Josh going to Australia, but, you know, he's a friend, so I guess I'll let that happen. Anyway, that's the course. I hope this was useful to you. I hope that if you're interested in learning Python, you'll consider SANS SEC 573 Automating Information Security with Python. With that, Carol, if there's any questions, I'll turn this back over to you, and we'll take any questions that people have.
All right, great. Well, thanks for that great presentation. We do have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for Mark, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first question is, what would be your suggestion for the best way to start learning Python as a beginner, but focusing simultaneously on automating tasks for security? Does SEC 573 assume you know Python already?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I hope that the question was probably early on in the presentation. 573 is going to assume that you have no programming background. We will start out from the very fundamentals of what a variable is, what an if then else statement is, how these things work, and there's 2 days of the essentials workshop. Now, as I said, if you come in and you already know the skills, you'll have more advanced labs that you can work through, and if you're new to the class, you'll spend more time working through the first 50 to 60 challenges in the pyWars server, and if you're more advanced, you'll work through the first 40 challenges very quickly, and then you'll spend the majority of the time in the more advanced material that's in the class. So the course is designed to meet you where your skill objectives are, and I would say, we have a my largest customer is military and government who take the class, and I would say in those classes 90% of the people who come to the class have never coded ever before. So the vast majority of my customers have never coded before. Now when I teach at public conferences, the mix is a bit different. We typically have a smaller number of people who have never coded before, but still we'll have some people there who have never coded before. I'd say maybe 15 to 20% have never coded before when they come to the public classes. But excellent question. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there a version of SEC 573 that skips day 1 and 2 for those that already can program? Maybe you already addressed this. For those that can already program, I'm thinking you just addressed it.
Yeah, I think so. It's not a different version, but the course is designed so that if you already know days 1 and 2, then you're going to fly through days 1 and 2 material. It's very typical that advanced programmers will be working on day 3 material by the end of day 1. So I get to watch people as they progress through the pyWars challenges through the scoreboard like everybody else. If you're an advanced programmer, everybody will know you're an advanced programmer by looking at the scoreboard. How is that guy so amazingly already on day 3 material at the end of day 1? But But there'll be enough material in there, and I'll be able to help you out as you work through the advanced material as well.
All right, and several people are wondering, are there plans to offer Sec 573 as a VLive or on-demand class?
That is an excellent question. I think that, well, I thought that we were going to do that last year. It somewhat depends on the demand for the class. So the way SANS determines which classes are going to go to be on demand is they determine what the demand is for that class based upon participation at conferences. I think we are at the point where Python will likely become an on-demand class in the next year or so, but I don't actually know for certain if it's going to happen or not. But I hope it'll be available sometime this year, but I can't promise.
All right, thanks, Mark. Is Python 2 better than Python 3 for security stuff?
That is an excellent question. I would say one problem with Python 2 is that it is end of life 2020. So we have 3 years before Python 2 goes away, or whatever goes away might mean to the Python community. It's not likely going to disappear, but certainly by 2020, the default Python interpreter on all of our Linux and Macintoshes will be Python 3. So as you are developing programs, you should certainly be looking towards Python 3 as your programming language. So the approach that we take in the course is, well, let me say this though. There are certain modules, there are things that work very well and are geared towards the information security professional that just don't work in Python 3 today. Specifically, I'm thinking of py2exe, pyinstaller. These are some modules that we can use to create executables, but it works with Python 2. Now there are some methods and some tools and techniques that are out there, a little less stable for creating some Python 3.0 modules, and the compatibility for all of the libraries and things like that. It's just not as rich as it is for Python 2. So the approach that I suggest that you take is to write Python 3.0 compatible code in your Python 2.7 interpreters. Today, the default interpreter on Linux systems is Python 2.7, and it will be until they change. So there is a RFC, if you will, it's called PEP 395 that is from Guido and the Python crew, suggesting that the default interpreters stay at Python 2.7 on Linux systems for a while. So if we're going to be deploying these to as many platforms as we want, to be able to deploy it to the best possible scenario for you is to have Python 2.7 code that is written in a way that it's forward compatible with Python 3, so that when Python 3 becomes that default interpreter, the code will just work. And we talk about in the class how to develop code that is Python 3.0 forward compatible in Python 2.7. Now the labs can be completed by people in both either Python 2.7 or Python 3.0. So if you have a preference of one over the other, then you're certainly welcome to develop in whichever language you prefer. But my recommendation will stick with PEP 394, which is we suggest that Python 2.7 be your interpreter, and just recognize that 3.0 is coming, 2.7 is going away, and we need to develop code that will work with Python 3.
All right, thank you. Will this course also help with security intelligence or work with OSINT tools?
Certainly the way that the course is written, we're talking about skills that you can use in any information security discipline. It's regular expressions, it's files, it's network I/O, it's retrieving and interacting with websites, it's gathering statistics, data structures that you need to collect statistics and things like that. So it's useful in all disciplines. Now we do have the themes throughout there. So I have a theme where it's defensive, We have a theme where it's forensics, and we have a theme where it's offensive, so that you can see the practical application of those skills in each of those different disciplines. But the skills that you learn on each of the days are, universal to the information security industry as a whole. So to answer your question, yes, I strongly believe that regardless of what discipline you're in information security, automating your daily routine and doing things more efficiently is going to help you out.
All right, thanks. Do you earn a GPYC for taking 573, or do you get a GPYC certificate test voucher for taking 573?
So when you register for a class of SANS, you have the opportunity to register for just the class, or register for the class with a certification attempt, so there's various registration options. So if you plan on taking the certification, when you register, you can sign up for the certification attempt that comes along with that. It's a proctored exam that you have to go to a Pearson VUE testing center, just like all of the other GIAC exams to do that. If you don't plan on taking the certification exam, then your costs are going to be lower.
All right, thanks. This one is kind of several questions in one. Is Python language open source? Does it require a developer kit or compiler to be installed locally? Is there a specific OS platform required to code and run Python?
Yeah, so excellent question. Yes, it is open source, but it's pre-compiled. You can just download the Python installer packages and install them on a Windows system. Python is by default installed on most Linux and Mac systems, but again, there are binary packages out there that you can just download and install these without having to compile Python from source. So just running the Python installation on a Windows system, or on most Linux and Mac platforms, all you have to do is have the Python program on that system, and then you can run it. There are third-party modules that you can install with Python, and we get into all of the details and nuances of that and how to make your applications cross-platform compatible in the course.
All right, thanks. And our last question or comment says, can SEC 573 be added to some training sessions in Western states, or at least in the Midwest? It's hard to get to Eastern states or overseas locations. So I guess that's more of a suggestion than anything.
Yes. I hear you, and I would love, you're absolutely right. The Python has run in Vegas on the West Coast a couple of times. I have been itching to come out to SANS West at Monterey, California, or San Francisco. What they haven't done it yet. You're right. We've done Las Vegas a couple of times. I think that we'll be doing Las Vegas again this year in September. But really, SANS determines the course scheduling. I'm sure they would appreciate hearing that there is a demand for it out on the West Coast. If you want to contact somebody at SANS.
All right. Well, with that, we're out of questions. Thank you so much, Mark, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, you can visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.